Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Lewis Hatchett, and in this episode, I'm going to be talking about three methods that you can use to help you not choke under pressure. So, if you find that you struggle when you get put under pressure and you don't perhaps perform to your best and how you want to, then these three methods could be the solution to your worries. So, let's dive straight in. So, if you've had a performance where you've been put under pressure and then you haven't perhaps acted or performed the way you hoped, then you are among many of us. Pressure is a part of sport, it's a part of life. It doesn't even have to be in sport. It could be something like giving a presentation. And then when you've done that presentation, you just didn't feel like it went exactly how you wanted to. Ultimately, the reason why we end up choking under pressure is down to one thing, really, and that is anxiety. That's the worry, that's the stress, the pressure that's getting to us. So, the thing that we're going to try and control is not only the anxiety, but a few mechanisms that we can shift our attention to away from these worries of anxiety or these ideas of what might go wrong and things like that. So, what I'm going to talk about is essentially the three ways in which you may, I'm not going to say crumble under pressure, but essentially you will not feel, you not perform at your best under pressure. There's three main theories that I want to touch on. The first one is reinvestment theory. Now, reinvestment theory is when you're put under pressure that you move back to a earlier stage of learning. I can give you an example that's not sport related. Let's say you're driving a car. When you drive a car and you're learning to drive a car, you're very conscious of every single move that you are making in the car that you're trying to drive. You're aware of where your hand is on the steering wheel, on the gear stick, everything. But as you start to learn to drive, and as you then end up passing your test and you become a driver that's been driving for, say, 10 years, you don't even think about driving. There's so many parts of that that you don't think about. But let's say then you go into a car park and you're trying to park the car, but suddenly an 18-wheeler is up behind you and beeping at you. A guy in there is getting angry and asking you to do this as quickly as you can. There's a chance that you now are starting to think about what you're going to do in order to park that car where your hand is on the steering wheel. And sometimes that's where people get flustered. Essentially, what's happening is you've moved from this very automated and automatic stage of learning to then a very novice stage where it's clunky, you're very conscious and aware of your movements. And that's ultimately what you're doing. You're becoming super conscious of the processes that you're doing. So the idea is that when we're automatic and things are running smoothly, you're not thinking about it. You're not really consciously aware of what you're doing. And that's great because it looks effortless. But then when you are under pressure and you're really conscious of those movements, it can really be detrimental to performance because you're just so aware of everything that you're doing and you're not able to do that fluid, automated movement. So that's a real quick sort of intro into reinvestment theory. If you're interested in it, you can go look it up. It's a really common form of impact under pressure and a lack of performance under pressure. I have felt it before. I feel it in many different levels, and I have fallen ill of it for sure. So, what is there a solution to if this is perhaps happening to you? Well, ultimately, a really common way of being able to overcome this is what is called a holistic process goal. And this is essentially where you might hear an athlete say a phrase to themselves, which ultimately reminds them of the technical cues that they need to do in order to perform that skill. So if you were to break down, I don't know, a free throw in basketball, and there are so many different aspects to putting that ball into the basket, technically, that is. So where your arm needs to be, the positioning, the height that you need to throw it, all the different parts of the mechanics and the technical areas in that skill that make that up. And not only that, what you do as an individual to get the result. But when we're in the moment and when we're under pressure, we don't want to be thinking about all that. We want to be making sure that that process, that shot just happens really smoothly and we're not having to do much thinking at all. So the way that we overcome that is that you take the technical cues, the technical wordings that you are using, the phrases that you're doing in training, and then you ultimately distill it down to one word that when you say it, your mind remembers what all of those cues are. So it could be something like smooth, long, short, whatever it might be. It'd be a specific cue to you that will allow you to do that. I know I had one when I was playing professional cricket. I had one which was tall, and that just literally told me to stay nice and tall. But with that, it was my shoulders would go back. I would be pumping my arms. There was so much that was under that one word that would just allow me to do it. So when I was under pressure, I just knew what to do. So I knew what to say. Or it might be something like where my eyes need to go, where I need to be looking. And I might say one word, which is just a reminder of where I need to be focusing my attention onto, rather than trying to remember all these different areas that I might have to focus on. And you add that into a performance routine, and you can add it into your training so you can practice it and play around with different words and see the ones that perhaps work best. That's where I always encourage you to perform under pressure in training so that you know whether it works or it doesn't and you find them. But ultimately, that word for you is going to be really individual. It's going to be one that comes from your training, comes from your skills, comes from your process, comes from whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. And it's going to be something that's not complicated, and that you remember everything that is underneath that technical cue, and you'll remember it under pressure. The next is attentional control. Now, basically, this is just when we are under pressure and we start focusing on far too many things that are irrelevant rather than relevant. So it could be you start focusing on the crowd, you could be focusing on the conditions, like the environment around you, the people around you, but those are not necessarily what is going to be relevant to what you need to be focusing on to achieve the outcome you want to achieve. So again, let's say you are a tennis player and you're pretty much trying to just focus on the ball. You're trying to return the ball over the net. That's a very simplistic form of tennis, and I'm sorry any tennis players that are listening, but I'm just using it as an example. So essentially, you're just trying to return that ball over the net, and the thing you need to focus on is the ball. But if you are focusing on the judges, the line judges, or maybe even the crowd or people around you, that's taking a lot of your attention away from the thing that you need to be focusing on. And the more that you allow your attention to be lost, the more you do not focus on something that is relevant. So something that can help you with this is where I actually encourage things like a meditation practice, because the goal with attentional control is that, yes, you may lose your attention, but you do want to refocus your attention back onto something that's task relevant. And a big part of that process is noticing when you have lost your attention, noticing when you're focusing on something else, and then having your mind refocused back onto something. And that is pretty much what meditation teaches you. It teaches you to notice when you've become distracted, notice when you've shifted your attention somewhere else, and then bring it back on task. And your mind is going to do this over and over again. But we know that in order to maintain concentration and attention, you just build the skill of getting distracted, noticing, and then getting back onto task as quickly as possible and doing that over and over again. And that builds up a battery of attention. And you're just constantly getting distracted, coming back on, and then hopefully staying on task. It's not about constantly being on task and constantly noticing that you need to be on task. You are going to have moments where you be distracted. As anyone who has done a meditation practice before will know, it's just about the speed at which you notice being distracted and get back on task. That's one way in which you can overcome that attentional control loss. So give that a go, especially if you feel like it's something that you do where you just find your attention wandering all the time and you're not focusing on the things that you need to be focusing on. The third one is ironic effects. Now, for any of my golfers out there, you may have felt this for sure. And I only use golf because I I have done this so many times. An ironic effect is when you maybe say standing over a golf ball and you say, don't hit it right, don't hit it right, don't hit it right. And you're saying that whether in person or in your mind. And then what do? You hit it right. And so it's what's called an ironic effect, that you actually do the thing that you're telling yourself not to do. But ultimately, what you're doing is you're giving that attention to an outcome and you're not focusing on the one you actually want. You're focusing so much on this negative outcome that it actually just sticks in your mind and you do it anyway. You just are so drawn to it. So, really, and quite obviously, the outcome for this one to help you overcome it is to focus on what you want to do. So, here you might start to create a mantra or maybe even an imagery process where you visualize the outcome that you want. You visualize everything that goes with it and everything that it looks like in order to achieve that outcome. Or you teach yourself a self talk practice, which could be motivational. It could also be instructional. So, again, kind of going back to one of those process goals of a word that allows you to just execute the skill. But ultimately, you want to say the thing that you do want to do. We don't want to be telling ourselves over and over again the thing that I don't want to be doing. We want to say what we do want to be doing. And then we allow our attention, our focus to go towards that. And then hopefully that gives us the outcome that we want. Now, all of these are not guaranteed that you are going to get a great outcome. They're designed to help you improve the chances of you not choking under pressure and putting in a better performance under pressure than you perhaps did in the first place. Ultimately, the best thing with all of this is to have a plan, is to practice under pressure and to also recognize that you're going to come under pressure. And if you don't feel ready or don't feel like you've practiced something that's allowed you to alleviate these feelings of pressure, then you're not going to feel as confident in it. Ultimately, I look for the outcome I would always want in sport is I want to reduce my anxiety and increase my confidence. And once we can do that, we're pretty much in a good place. So try to have a plan, try to have something that you're able to use in training and you can practice, you can see if it works. You'll know if it works if you put yourself under pressure in training, and then recognize that when you do go under pressure in a game, it doesn't guarantee the outcome for sure, but it's hopefully going to help you lower that anxiety. It's going to help you focus on the things that you want to be focusing on more often than not. And I would hope to believe that you will start to see some positive outcomes, especially under pressure. And the brilliant thing about it is when you do have that plan and process that you've put in place and then you do perform under pressure, you feel great. You feel awesome. There's nothing better than achieving something under really tough circumstances. But in order to do that, it's not just luck. It's not just something you can be born with. It actually has to be trained and something that you can train and learn. And here are some things that you can do for that. So that's it. That's what I've got for this week's episode. Be sure to reach out to me over on Instagram at Lewis Hatchett if you've got any questions or if you've had an experience under pressure where you've found something that has really worked for you. Come over and let me know. You can also find me over on TikTok at Lewis_Hatchett. And you can also reach out via the website where there's plenty of resources over there. So that's lewishatchett.com for the website. So thank you once again for joining me on this episode of the podcast, and I will see you later.